I didn't expect an AI debate on God to make strong arguments on both sides. This one surprised me. Alright, so let's get started, guys. As I always do, I'm going to jump around a little bit. But here we go for the premise and the intro.
We used a powerful AI model to create two intellectual thinkers, an atheist.
By the way, this is a blind reaction, so just know that I have not seen this video before.
Hi, I'm an atheist.
And a believer in God.
Hi, I'm a believer in God.
We put these two thinkers in a face-to-face debate to tackle one of humanity's most...
Also, I'm going to start the video off by saying this. I used to be like a hard left atheist, and not recently, it's been a couple of years now, probably 3, 5, 6 years almost. I've slowly kind of, for personal reasons, I've become a believer and kind of center-right politically. And I think those two things are very correlated and interrelated. But that's kind of my background and my perspective as we go into this. The atheists will always have a stronger argument in this debate. They're on stronger footing because most religions that exist, contemporary religions are going to be very flawed, obviously because they're ancient, most of them. So anyway, let's get into this.
Challenging question.
That doesn't disprove the existence of God, but let's persist.
To judge this debate, we selected 5 different AI models as referees to see which arguments they would evaluate as stronger. Join us and promise not to cheat. Don't skip ahead in the video to see the final results. The debate begins now. Does the existence of suffering and evil in the world disprove the existence of God?
Yes, the existence of suffering and pain in the world.
My answer to that is obviously not. We're alleging an all-powerful creator, right? Or something, and if it's the universe, as the Hindus would say, or in Eastern religions, pain and suffering is part of the cycle. So does not disprove the existence of God whatsoever.
World is one of the strongest arguments against God's existence. If there's a God who is both all-powerful and all-loving, why would he allow innocent children to die of hunger? Why would cancer exist? Why would earthquakes and tsunamis destroy innocent families? I know some people say these sufferings are to test our faith or to give us free will, but these justifications aren't logical. A loving father would never torture his child to see how much they love him. An all-powerful God could create a world with both free will and love.
I feel like this is a really strong attack on the Abrahamic perception of God, but it doesn't necessarily say anything about God in the Eastern sense or other senses. You know what I mean? Like, this is no other, God being all-powerful and all-loving is only in the Western religions. So that's where this falls flat.
Without all this unnecessary pain and suffering. It's like if I had a lab full of mice and deliberately let them suffer and die, just to see which ones would remain loyal to me. This would be unethical, even for an ordinary human, let alone a perfect and all-loving God.
Each response from 0 to 100 based on these 10 criteria. The score these models gave to the atheist's first response is as follows. The score these...
I'm just reading through the criteria here. Internal coherence of the argument, use of evidence, clarity, relevance. I feel like that's where this one fails. Oh, yeah. Universality is where that one fails. Applicability across different viewpoints. Like, bro, you're only attacking religions that claim that God is all-loving. What about the ones that don't say that? There are plenty that don't. And don't believe in God as this one omniscient figure, right? It's more about a shared consciousness among all living beings. What about those religions? You're not attacking those at all. So you've missed the mark there, for sure.
Models gave to the atheist's first response is as follows.
I don't deny the suffering that exists in the world, but this suffering isn't proof that God doesn't exist. In fact, without God, we couldn't even say something is bad or unethical. When you say innocent children suffering is bad, you're using a moral standard that itself needs a transcendent source.
I disagree with this. As a believer, people have different moralities. Even different religions have different standards of ethics. For example, there are religions, I'm not going to mention names, I'm going to try to refrain from doing that throughout this video. There are religions who say that people who don't believe in their faith should be slaughtered, and that is a moral standard in that religion, right? So even with a transcendent source, morality differs. So that's not a good argument. Secondly, people who are atheists, there are plenty of people that I know that are atheists who are good people and have a sense of morality, living by the golden rule or whatever it might be. Do unto others as you would like to be done unto yourself, however you say that, right? That's a rule a lot of people live by, and that has nothing to do with religion. It doesn't have to have anything to do with religion, right? So this is a weak argument as well, I think.
Consider your mouse lab example. Why do you think harming mice is wrong? In a world without God, we're all just collections of atoms that randomly came together. In this view, suffering and pain have no real meaning. They're just chemical reactions in the brain. Besides, we can't be sure that God doesn't have good reasons for allowing this suffering. Like a child who doesn't understand why their parents allow them to get a painful vaccine. From our limited perspective, we might not understand all divine wisdom.
That last part is fair. That's fair.
Your comparison with giving a child a vaccine is interesting, but there's an important difference. Parents know the vaccine is necessary for the child's health, and its short-term pain prevents dangerous diseases. But when a child dies of hunger, what greater good is there?
You don't know what the ultimate plan for the soul is. If you believe in a soul, if you believe in the existence of an afterlife, then, you know what I mean, the suffering you face in this material world could be nothing in the grand scheme of things, right? So, again, terrible argument for atheism. The problem with atheism is that I'm not trying to attack people who are atheists. Again, like I said, I used to be an atheist, and I'm not trying to attack people who are believers. But if you try to convince somebody else on this topic, you're an idiot, because there's no way you can. Atheism, it's just, you'd have to rely on logical fallacies. Atheism, you can't disprove the existence of something. It's impossible. You cannot prove to me that unicorns don't exist. I always use that, right? Because unicorns obviously probably don't exist. But you can't prove that. How are you gonna tell me that unicorns don't exist? Can you prove it to me? If you're telling me unicorns don't exist, have you covered every square inch of the universe, and can you prove to me, show me every square inch, and show me that unicorns don't exist? You can't. You just simply can't. You can't even do that on Earth. They could live underwater. You know what I mean? We don't know. There are all these possibilities we have not crossed off the list. We can assume in all likelihood that unicorns don't exist, but that doesn't mean that, it's just that's a flat and pretty shitty line of reasoning by atheism.
Regarding ethics without God, your argument isn't logical.
Of course, we have not seen proof of a higher power, right? That's conclusive. That's, there's that as well, but,
We can decide what's right and wrong based on the consequences and impacts of our actions on others. If an action causes unnecessary suffering to intelligent beings, that action is morally wrong. We don't need God to understand this. Also, if ethics must come from a transcendent source, how do you know that source is benevolent? Maybe that transcendent being is evil itself. This is Plato's famous question. Do the gods love good deeds because they are good, or are good deeds good because the gods love them?
That last part makes no sense to me. Again, I feel like it's only attacking Western ideologies, so it's just incomplete as an attack on religion globally.
Let me address your final point about Plato's dilemma. I believe goodness and God are inseparable. It's like asking whether a circle is round because it's round, or because that's the definition of a circle. God is the embodiment of absolute good, so he can't be evil. Regarding the example of starving children, it's true we can't see the greater good, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You're drawing a general conclusion from our limited knowledge. It's like an ant saying that because it can't understand why humans destroy its nest to build a hospital, there must be no good reason. About ethics without...
What an analogy. Oh my god, that's insane. You think the ant gives a fuck if we build a hospital, right? It's still kind of a shitty thing to do. And relating humans, in that analogy, humans are God, and the ant is an ant, and the ant is us, basically. And we're saying that humans are selfish enough to destroy ants to build a hospital for themselves. Somehow that reflects how God behaves. Terrible analogy, horrible analogy. Literally 0 out of 10.
God, the problem is you can't explain why we should care about others' welfare. In a
Sure, you can. What do you mean? This is a weak argument for believers. I mean, like, look, this is, and this is, I may dead this video because this seems to be talking about Christianity. But let's go through this point that it makes again.
It's like an ant saying that because it can't understand why humans destroy its nest to build a hospital, there must be no good reason. About ethics without God, the problem is you can't explain why we should care about others' welfare.
Golden rule, simple as that. When I was an atheist, I still abided by certain moral codes. Like if I didn't want someone to do something to me or I was harming somebody else, I wouldn't do that thing, right? I just wouldn't do it. But I was able to justify, doing drugs and harming myself and engaging in self-harm type of behaviors without any sort of restraint, because it was like, you know what, who am I hurting? Who's this really hurting if I pop this bean or whatever, right? And now recently, as I've grown into becoming a believer because of experiences that I've had, I feel like the way that, religion recommends you live your life is actually more fruitful, more fulfilling, and better. It produces better results, better material results, as well as probably karmic results later on. So the argument that you should care about others' welfare, and the only reason you should care about others' welfare is because of God, and if you don't believe in God, there's no reason to care about others' welfare, that's a terrible argument. It's just horrible. For me, it was the exact opposite. I cared about others before, I still care about others now, but I care about myself way more now that I believe in a higher power. And I'm focused on a longer term journey with myself and my inner being, my soul, than I was before. So that makes me reflect inward, but that's not. I feel like this is just a really weak argument. There are really weak arguments here on both sides. There's no way you can prove God exists, and there's no way you can disprove God exists. So it's impossible. These premises that they're trying to defend are already just completely impossible to support. So I'm interested in seeing how this goes. I think these are all just going to be horrible arguments, and I'm going to turn the video off more shortly than anticipated.
In a materialistic world, why should the suffering of others matter to me? This becomes just a personal preference, not an objective moral truth.
Because if you're ever in that situation, you want to relate to people. That's a basic human emotion. Sympathy, empathy. You don't need to believe in God to have that. It's ridiculous.
The problem with your ant comparison is that we humans, unlike ants, have the ability for moral understanding and analysis. And with this ability, we see that many of the world's sufferings are completely meaningless and unnecessary. You ask why we should care about others' welfare. I say this is a question that should be asked of a believer. Do you only care about others because God said so? Meaning, if God said torturing children was good, would you accept it?
This is ridiculous, man. These are two bots trying to gotcha each other. It's actually crazy. I can't believe that they have, This is exactly how humans operate too, though, in these spaces. It's not about trying to discuss things and reach a conclusion. It's about trying to hit each other with gotchas until one side quits. I'm going to skip through a little bit.
Our brains, there's an important difference. If God created us, we can be confident that our reasoning ability was designed to understand truth, not just for survival.
So I skipped through, and obviously, God lady is getting cooked. And, no God, man, this looks like he's up. Running it up right now. Let's see.
Your comparison between scientific theories and religious revelations isn't accurate.
No, it's because never mind, she wasn't. It was just because she was behind one. But anyway.
Scientific theories are testable and falsifiable, but religious claims aren't. When a scientific theory doesn't match the evidence, scientists discard it. But when a religious belief doesn't match reality, it's usually justified, or they say, God's ways are mysterious.
It's a good point. A lot of the time, defenders of religion are ridiculous in this way. It's just like, it's circular reasoning. Most religions, it's like, why is this so? Oh, because God said so. And who said that God said it? Oh, God's messenger. And who made that guy the messenger? Oh, God. You know what I mean? It just always goes back like, this is written in this text, so it must be true. Why must it be true? Because God made this text. You know what I'm saying? And then it's like, okay, like, it's just super circular, man. And how do you know God said this? Oh, because it says so in this text that God said this. Come on, like, that shit is terrible. I'm not gonna lie. That's a weak point for religion for sure. I think organized religion does suck in a lot of ways.
Your argument about the best possible world is also problematic. You say this might be the best state, but an all-powerful God could overcome any limitation. The bridge example isn't appropriate because an engineer has physical limitations, but God doesn't. And finally, your argument about trusting reason is circular. You say because God created our reason, it's trustworthy, but how do you know God created our reason? Because your reason tells you so? This argument goes in circles.
Yo, Gemini is brutal over here, bro. That is crazy. It's giving all like 61, 62s.
It's true that scientific theories are falsifiable, but many religious beliefs can be falsified too. For example, if it were proven that Jesus never existed, this would refute Christianity.
But how can you prove that Jesus never existed? You know what I mean? We don't have historical records that go back that far, and the only historical records are tied to religions. Like, they're in religious texts and stuff. Like, I mean, we don't have that type of shit. It's not like they were keeping census data, you know what I mean? So it's impossible to prove that Jesus never existed. It's impossible to prove that God doesn't exist. I don't think that weakens atheism, but I do think it is ridiculous for an atheist to try to disprove the existence of God or really the details of any religion. Unless, of course, I mean, there are some elements of religions that are easily disprovable. Some things that are written in the text, like the Bible, whatever else, whatever other texts, right? Like, they're easily disprovable, certain things. But for the most part, the overall, gist of it, you can't really disprove that. Like, that there is an afterlife, there is a God, that you should live life this way to attain a better outcome in the afterlife. You can't disprove any of that, really. Those main principles that apply to most religions.
Or if it were proven that the Quran contains contradictions, this would reject its claim of divine origin. Regarding God's omnipotence, you're presenting an oversimplified concept. Omnipotence means the ability to do anything logically possible, not contradictory things. God can't both give us genuine free will and prevent all our bad choices. That's contradictory. And about the circular argument, we discover God's existence through various ways: personal experience, philosophical reasoning, historical evidence, and the order in the universe. Trusting our reason is just one of these paths, not the only way.
Brutal Gemini. Yeah, I don't know. She didn't say a lot of anything at that. That was a terrible answer. But, yeah, whatever. That was horrible.
The problem is that the personal experiences you mention exist in all religions. A Hindu would say they've experienced Krishna. A Buddhist...
Yeah, that's no Hindu would ever say that. That doesn't even really make sense. Whatever. But anyway, a Buddhist would say they've reached nirvana. Most don't. Most devout Buddhists don't claim that because it's nearly impossible.
would say they've reached nirvana. These experiences can't all be true simultaneously.
You don't know that. You don't know that we're not all experiencing the same thing and perceiving it in different ways based on the framework that we've been given by our religious background, right? You can't sit here and claim that. That's not... As an atheist, you can't claim that these experiences can't all be true. You can say that we are relaying them to our human counterparts and peers in a way that's not representative of how the reality actually is. It's not fully representative, and because of that, there are differences in the way we're representing it. You can't say that they can't all be true.
Regarding falsifiability, your examples aren't accurate. Even if it were proven Jesus didn't exist, many Christians would say faith in the spiritual meaning is more important than historical reality. Or if contradictions were found in sacred texts, they'd say we need to find the correct interpretation. And finally, the order in the universe you talk about could be the product of natural processes. Darwin showed that even the most complex organisms can emerge without an intelligent designer. We no longer need to assume God's existence to explain the order in nature.
I agree with him. You don't need to assume God's existence to explain order in nature. Obviously, there's going to be some order that arises in any sort of scenario, any sort of evolutionary or scientific scenario. You can put bacteria in a petri dish, and some sort of order emerges, right? There's no, it's not just, it is random for the most part, but you can find patterns and things like that. And eventually, there'll be enough growth to show like a direction that this thing is going. But you also can't disprove that God put that there. So, that's, yeah.
Evolution theory only explains how different species derive from each other. It can't explain why anything exists at all, or why the laws of physics are so finely tuned that life became possible. Regarding different spiritual experiences, I agree they can't all be true in the same sense. But this is like several people touching an elephant
Facts. Good way to put it.
in the dark. Each understands part of the truth. The variety of spiritual experiences might represent different aspects of a transcendent truth. And about falsifiability, it's true that some believers deny any evidence. But this problem exists in science too. Some scientists cling to their theories despite contrary evidence. This is a weakness of humans, not a weakness of religion or science itself.
See, but the thing is, I don't like when this argument turns into religion versus science, because smart people know that science and religion can coexist. Like, science can be what we deal with in the material world, and we can base all of our actions on science, and we can still hold this belief, in religion that governs our moral code. And religion can be what we feel is the driving force behind how the science works, right? Why the science works. The science is the how, the religion is the why. You don't have to have a mutually exclusive understanding of these two things. All right, I'm going to jump a little more.
The number 2 is also problematic. Numbers are abstract concepts, not real beings. The number 2 has no cause because it doesn't have physical existence. It's just a concept we defined. But the God you're talking about is supposed to be a real being that affects the world. And about religion adapting to truth, this precisely shows that religion follows science, not guides us toward truth. If religion really came from the creator of the universe, it shouldn't need so many changes and reinterpretations.
I mean, that's coming from an atheist view where God is just so perfect and he's trying to communicate clearly, and that's not the way most religious people interpret that, So that's like the wrong expectation to have when you're assessing a religion. If you have that expectation, of course it's imperfect, so it's going to fall apart. The religion itself is going to fall apart. But nobody's arguing that religion is completely perfect, or it's not somebody's perception of something.
This is part of the divine plan, that our understanding of truth gradually deepens. Just like a good teacher doesn't tell the student everything at once, but allows them to discover it themselves.
Not true. Not true. Discovery is one method of teaching. It doesn't make you a good teacher if you use that method. Plenty of good teachers just tell you everything so that you can actually, that's a very valid method of teaching. Anyhow, I'm going to skip to the end and just see who won, because this is actually complete bullshit and this just sucks. This is like, there's no point to this at all, Okay, it looks like we're at she's got to score more than 100 points, so there's no way she lost for sure, so.
Imagine if God had said the earth is round. People of that time, who only saw the flat surface of the earth, would probably have rejected this statement and ignored the entire spiritual message of the text. Sometimes even simple truth needs an appropriate cultural context.
That's a weak argument for religion. I know where she was going with that, but like to say that, maybe God didn't tell us everything because it wasn't the right time. I mean, like, that's just, that seems like a cop-out. Cope.
In this debate, both sides scored high on their argumentation, with the atheist side having a slight edge. Keep in mind that the content of this debate, and consequently the scores, depended on the initial prompt and the evaluation criteria. The goal was to see how two large language models debate with a slight edge.
Look, I'm just going to say this to close out. In a debate format, the atheist is always going to have the upper hand because belief is faith-based, right? Like this is not something you can prove and show with your eyes. Atheism is going to rely on the objective truths that we know about, and those all support the lack of a God. So, or at least the ambiguity as to whether God exists or not. So in this academic setting, atheism is always going to have the upper hand, but that doesn't mean God doesn't exist.